lucky today to have Irene Weiss with us and her daughter Leslie, who will be interviewing with her. Irene was born in 1930 in Czechoslovakia, which is part of Ukraine. When the Nazi Germany dismembered Czechoslovakia, her town became under the Hungarian rule. Over a 2-month period, beginning in May 1944, 425,000 Jews were deported from Hungary to Auschwitz-Birkenau, including Irene and her family. Irene at that time was only 13 years old. She's here today to tell us about her experiences and her memories and the history. She's been a volunteer at the Holocaust Museum and has shared her story with many people who've come through the museum. And today she's here to share it with us. Thank you, Irene.
Okay, see how this works. Okay. Okay. So thank you for inviting me today to speak. I was a witness to something that needs to be remembered, and I'm going to talk to you about this tragic period of history that I lived through and can talk to you about it firsthand. Even though I'm 94 years old, what happened to me is still very vivid in my memory. Nazis, then most of the Jews of Europe by that time had been killed. But the Nazis then turned to their attention to the last Jewish community that remained, 500,000 Jews, which was then Hungary. I lived in a small town in Hungary with my parents, 5 siblings, and a large extended family. And I was 13 years old. My father owned a lumber yard and my mother took care of a large family. We attended school, played with the neighborhood kids. Our lives revolved around our Jewish holidays. We were a close, happy family. Life began to change for us in 1939 when Hungary joined the alliance with Germany and began to institute the Nuremberg laws against their Jewish population. So Jewish teachers, doctors, lawyers were fired. Jewish children could not attend public schools. My father's business was confiscated and given to a non-Jew. Later, we had to wear a yellow star on our clothes so that we would be an easier target. The war was almost over, but the final solution was proceeding with speed and efficiency. In September 1944, on the last day of Passover, Hungarian local officials announced that the Jews in my town had 24 hours to leave their home with 1 suitcase each and assemble at the town hall. We had no idea what would happen to us. A delegation made up of the mayor, police chief, and my school principal arrived at our door. They demanded that my father hand over all his money and valuables. They would not take no for an answer. My father gave them some items, and soon after that, we left our house. We closed our gate behind us so our dog wouldn't follow us. Along with the 10 other Jewish families in our town, my family was taken to an abandoned brick factory some miles away. There we joined thousands of Jewish families from neighboring towns that were also brought to this place. We were kept there for almost a month in overcrowded, unsanitary conditions. The men were called in for interrogation periodically. They demanded more money and more valuables. Our food supply from home was used up, and now we were dependent on the soup ration. After a month or so, a freight train arrived on the tracks alongside the brick factory. Orders were shouted to get our belongings and get into the train. We joined the crowd heading for the boxcars. No one told us our destination. My family struggled to keep together. We all managed to get into the same boxcar. There were 80 to 100 people inside that boxcar. For the sake of modesty, men moved to one side and women and children to the other side. A guard slammed the door shut and bolted it from the outside. Instantly, it was dark. People sat on the floor, back to back. Hours later, the train began to move. The only source of air was a small little window at one corner. There was a bucket for the toilet in the middle of the car. Hours passed, 2 nights, 2 days, the bucket filled up. Finally, the train stopped. We are at some kind of a camp, my father announced. There are barracks here. This must be a work camp. We had never heard of Auschwitz. The door opened and air and light rushed in. And there were dogs, guards with guns, and prisoners in striped uniforms. Get out, they shouted, and leave everything behind. My mother quickly grabbed some extra clothing for all of us and told us to put on layers. My head was already covered with a kerchief, and I put on an overcoat, a big overcoat. In a daze, I jumped out of the boxcar, down onto the platform, along with thousands of people. My family reached for one another, urgently trying to stay together in the swarm of people, noise, and confusion. As soon as we were out of the train, all of our possessions were dumped onto the platform and were loaded into waiting trucks. A guard shouted, men to one side, women line up, and children line up to the other side. In an instant, my father and 16-year-old brother Moshe were lined up in a large column of men to one side. I never saw them again. My father, sisters, younger brothers, and I were in another column of women and young children. The column edged forward. When we reached the front, a dozen or more Nazi guards blocked our way. One of them held a small stick. The one with the stick motioned my sister Serena, who was 17, to one side. In the next moment, he motioned my mother and 2 little brothers to the other side. And they disappeared from view. Only my younger sister Edith and I remained. The stick came down between us and sending her towards where my mother went. The Nazi guard looked at me and hesitated for an instant. Although I was only 13 and would have been sent to the children with the children, the kerchief on my head and my large coat made him confused, I suppose. He motioned me in the direction of my older sister and other young adults and turned his attention to the women and children lined up behind me. I leaned over to see if I could tell if my Edith caught up with our mother. It was impossible to see. I was devastated that somehow she would not catch up with our mother. And I lingered in that position somewhat like this. It wasn't possible to see what happened to her in this very fast moving crowd. So I learned after the war that this particular time, some SS soldier was taking pictures of the arrival and separation of the people. So I am in that picture, which I found out much later after liberation. But I will show it to you. Have a copy of it. Our family tried so hard to stay together. We were now completely torn apart. Needless to say, the trauma of the family being torn apart has never left me. Serena and I were then herded into a bathhouse where we were shaved, disinfected, and handed prison clothes. We were moved to a barrack with about 200 young women. We still didn't know where we were. We asked the other prisoners who came before us, when will we see our families?
Cannot,
Pointed to a chimney and said, you see the smoke, there is your family.
cannot hear you.
I thought, why would anybody say such a thing to us?
Cannot hear you.
In a few weeks, we were sent to work at a storage and processing area near gas chamber and crematorium number 4, where we sorted through the mountains of clothing.
Cannot hear her.
All other things people brought with them. Mountains of shoes, eyeglasses, toothbrushes, baby carriages, and every other household item brought by people arriving on many transports from
Much better.
Hungary, and
Go
also
up more.
belongings
Go up more.
that came out of the gas chambers. Because we worked and lived next to the gas chambers and crematorium, we soon had firsthand knowledge of what had happened to our families. Day and night, columns of young mothers with children and elderly men and women passed by our barrack. We watched them enter the gate that led to the gas chambers. Sometimes they called out to us, questions to us. By that time, nothing would save them. Day and night, the trains kept coming. First, I would hear the hissing of a steaming engine arriving at the platform, then the whistle of the train. And within a half hour or so, hundreds of women and children and elderly would pass by our barrack and disappear into the entrance of the gas chamber. Those arriving at night saw the smoke and flames belching from the chimneys and the burning of bodies in open pits. It looked to them like they were being herded into open flames. I plugged my ears with my fingers to block out their cries and prayers, and soon there was silence. In the distance, I would hear the whistle of another train arriving. 114 cattle trains arrived from Hungary in about 2.5 months to Auschwitz. The 4 gas chambers and crematoriums operated day and night, killing as many as 10,000 people a day. After 8 months in Auschwitz, in January 1945, the Russian army approached Auschwitz. We were hoping to be liberated by them soon. However, the Germans decided to evacuate Auschwitz, take out all the prisoners, and take us hundreds of miles towards Germany. This became a death march. It was wintertime, cold and snow, and we were being pushed along on highways day and night. Anyone who fell from exhaustion or sat down to rest was shot. By the time we reached a camp deep in Germany, we were sick and emaciated. There, my sister Serena was among those selected to be killed. When I realized that we were about to be separated, I said, I'm her sister. I was told, you can go too. They put us with other selected women into a place awaiting a truck that would come and take us to wherever the killing was. But perhaps because of the approaching Russian army and the resulting chaos on the highway, the truck never arrived. Soon after, the guards fled and the remaining survivors drifted out of the camp. From my immediate family of 8, only Serena and I survived. All of my young cousins perished along with their parents. When I saw children in the town after the war, I stopped and stared at them. I had not seen children in almost a year and a half. Children were condemned to death in the world I had just come from. So this is a very short summary, and I would like to talk to you more about it. There are pictures that are available that was taken by the Nazis. It was found after the war. This is called now the Auschwitz album, and it's really a history of what happened in Auschwitz in great detail. So I'll be happy to show you. Leslie will help me here to show some of the pictures, and I'll really will be glad to answer questions because there are a lot of gaps in the story. So after the pictures, I hope that you will ask questions and I'll fill in some of the details if there is time. So thank you for listening. See the pictures here. So where shall I begin? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now we can take it out, I guess. Yeah. Because I won't have to turn my head. Okay. Okay, I just. Oh, good. So, okay. So this is the entrance, the train transport coming into Auschwitz. This is the entering gate. And somewhere there that's not seen is in big writing says, Arbeit macht frei, in German, meaning work will set you free. So this you can see a train that arrived and the doors are open and people are jumping down to the platform and already quite a few are out. And there is a lot of shouting and orders given and a very noisy, hateful sounds of get out, leave everything behind and move and get out, and shouting, and everybody trying to keep with the families together in great confusion. And then still continuing to get out, and the shouting continues about men line up in one side, women and children to the other side. And some, I can't see them here, the prisoners in striped uniform are our people who had come before, young men who have been there for a while, and they were used to facilitate separating the crowds and moving them in the right place. Okay, that's okay, better. So you see huge crowds coming out and lots of children. So there is the train that you could see, and the people. Now the lineup has happened. The women and children are in a separate group. Again, you can see their confusion because we have no idea where we are and what's going on here. Now you can see some prisoners in striped uniform. There are sometimes these young men who would speak to us, to some of the people, they would say something like, they would see a young mother with children, yes, and they would if they could, they were not allowed to talk to us, but they would slip in something in Yiddish about let grandma hold the children. And that was an incredible advice that we didn't know why. They said, it's better, let grandma hold the children. And my mother's sister came with 3 children, and she was one of them that one of the young men said to her. And so she let her mother-in-law hold the children. And of course, the tragedy after the selection, she was sent towards the slave labor, the young adults, and the grandmother went with the 3 children to the gas chamber, which she found out later and for the rest of her life. Okay. So now everybody's out of this train, and on the very top of the picture there, you could see a truck. And this is after they were shouting, get out, and leave everything behind. The truck is already picking up all our belongings. So the big line here is the men who are separated. So my father and Moshe are in that line. Of course, I cannot see them. The lower group is the women and children, and they're in front of the Nazi soldiers and the one who is separating. And so they will move through there, and all the older women and children and people who are sick or whatever, they're separated out, and the rest, from this particular group, the rest of the women and children have already been separated out. This is the little bit left, and they will be separated. And then the ones up there near the fencing, they're the women and children who have already been separated. They're on the way to the gas chamber. And when these smaller group will be separated out, they will also join that group. And then they will be separating the men's group, because among them are also older men and younger boys who will also be sent to the gas chamber. When this is all done, it will, the platform will be empty. But when I was telling you a minute ago that a picture was taken of me by a Nazi, and just after I was separated from my sister Edith, and I stood there leaning in a little bit to see if she caught up with our mother, because I couldn't see, there was no way to see. And after a while, somebody motioned me to go, and I went to where the young adults, young women were sent for slave labor. At this point, I never even occurred to me that I too was separated, but I was just so upset about my 12-year-old sister being alone in this crowd, because I thought the families will be together, and that looks like we lost her because she's not going to be with us, because I realized the crowds were enormous. So this picture is caught of me is caught forever there. It's also on the wall in the museum in Washington. So then you see the truck there that is taking the belongings away. So all of a sudden, we don't know where we are. We're separated from our families. Now all our belongings are taken from us, including all our papers, all our documents. We're now unknown people, no name, no address, no identity, and the confusion is enormous. And you can imagine. Okay, next. After these young adults, and my sister and I among them, they put us through an incredible transformation. This is how we looked after. Our clothing, civilian clothing on, hair shaved. Sometimes they let us transports let people keep their own shoes. Other times they gave us some junk shoes, and took away our shoes. But all of a sudden, you know, sisters or mothers, we didn't recognize each other. And to explain to you the humiliation that took this transformation is unbelievable, from civilian modesty to just a body. Incredible shock. Okay, so after this transformation, so these are the ones who are selected to live and be slave laborers. Everybody else is either on the way to the gas chamber or already has been done. And then we're taken to barracks that looked like this, and there would be many on one shelf. The first night, it was in March. It was cold. It was very cold. And there was one blanket for maybe 6 to 8 people. Nobody could lie down back to back. And people are upset and cold and strangers, and everybody's trying to lean on everybody else, which isn't a good idea. And my sister told me later that I cried all night, and I deny that, but she must be right. You know. So many months after, over a month actually, we were assigned work. They were sorting out this huge number of groups that came in so many trains. Some were sent out of Auschwitz to other camps or nearby camps to slave labor. And my sister and I should mention that during that first night, the next day, we were thrown out of the barrack and the doors locked, and we stayed out all day there. People were milling around before they assigned work or separated people out. We just happened to practically step over my mother's 2 sisters who had arrived there a day before. And they were outside, and people were just, it was just chance. And that was the most wonderful chance for me, because they were young women in their 20s. To me, they were like mothers. I was 13, you know, I was even talking to them like Aunt Rosie and Aunt Piri. You know, they were adults to me. And for me, it meant life or death, without, not so much my sister, because she needed them too. So then we were assigned work. So this is an area where all the belongings that came out of many trains were put into this particular part of Auschwitz, several barracks, maybe quite a few barracks. They brought the things by trucks day and night and dumped them in this section that was designated for processing all the clothing and belongings that was brought to Auschwitz. So our assignment was to take all these things that was dumped, to bring it first of all into the barracks out of the weather. And for something like 8 months, 1,000 women were sorting out all the belongings that came with the people and repackage them and take off labels and get them ready for taking it to Germany for the German population. And what was brought to Auschwitz by so many people, the Hungarian transports brought over 400,000. And so the belongings were just mountains of everything. People brought whatever they thought would help them to survive or to sell, or, you know. So here we're seeing the shoes that were dumped here, and we had to sort them out of types. There was every kind of shoe, but, you know, baby shoes, boots, leather shoes, all kinds of shoes, and just the quantity is we can tell how many people were involved here. And okay, and okay, the next, okay. So now the shoes are inside, the clothes is inside, the belongings. And again, it filled many, many barracks, and 1,000 women were working on it in day and night shifts. So you can see now there's a little path in the middle of the barrack where we would be approached here, pick out a blanket full, you know, fill a blanket of, and take it to another section of the barrack where we would then sort it according to size and so on. In the 8 months we were there, we could never process everything because people kept being brought from Hungary. It was never ending belongings. Okay. So the rest of that particular area is a vast area where we work day and night. So this is a picture that shows a very sad place. These people, they're women and children. So they came from the train and they are heading for the gas chamber. If you look at the picture, it's just women and children. And when the Hungarian Jews were brought day and night to Auschwitz, there was a backup in the killing. They couldn't keep up with it. And so sometimes the people heading there had to wait their turn. These people are sitting there waiting their turn. They're in a little wooded area close to the gas chamber, but they have absolutely no idea why they're waiting. They're not, you can see on their faces that they're not concerned particularly. They don't know where they are. They're waiting for something. Sometimes they were told that they're going to go take a shower. So in the picture, because I found myself in a picture after the war in this album, I thought that, well, if I am in it, perhaps I'll find some other member of my family. And sure enough, after careful looking, and I found what is it, 2 little boys in the front here, Ruvain and Gershon, and there, and my mother, profile right there sitting next to them. And they don't look happy, I must say. But people seem to be looking at the camera. They have no idea what they're waiting for. Unfortunately for my state of mind, my little sister that I lost in the crowd, she is not among them. She probably did not catch up with them. So this is a picture of the security around Auschwitz. These are electrified fences that, you know, if anyone touched them, they died. And you see how fortified it is. In addition to that, there were guard towers all over the place. It wasn't not very easy to escape. So this is just a few of hundreds that were captured by the films. And so the pictures that the Nazi soldiers took for whatever reason has really become a monument, a mark, and what happened there. It's something that we can refer to as authentic, what was going on. And we know how they did it and what they did and how they separated and the whole process.
take some questions.
Right, so yes, the story is long, but I think it gives you some idea. So yes, I'm ready for the questions if you have any.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've got the microphone. Raise your hand if you've got a question. Ms. Weiss will give you a chance. Okay. And when you have the microphone, please identify yourself and then ask your question.
Hi, I'm Roberta Gorin. And my question is, where did these pictures, I mean, I know you said the Nazi, where did you get a hold of these pictures?
Well, many months after liberation, one of the survivors came. She was in Auschwitz after the Nazi soldiers left. She apparently entered the barrack where the Nazi barrack was, and in a night table she found an album. It belonged to the Nazi soldier. She took it, looked at it, and in it she found her family, pictures of her family and her town. And she decided that this was her family's history, kept it after liberation. She kept it for many months, didn't share it until it became known that such a thing exists. And then people convinced her that this is a record of all of it, and she should give it up. And of course she did. And it was taken to Israel, to Yad Vashem, where they made copies, and it came out in bookstores in this country. And Leslie was the first to see it in a bookstore. The first in my family, you know. Yes. Well, actually, it wasn't, so people didn't know about it. Leslie worked in that field, so she did, but the first in my family. And she brought one home. So I, of course, looked at astonishment. In fact, to me, the first thing I felt when I looked through it, I recognized everything. I thought, okay, now I know that it really happened. And I couldn't get over that idea that I kept really thinking that I was dreaming it. It didn't happen. It wasn't like that. I kept telling to myself, it really happened. It really happened. And then looking through it over and over, I showed you what I recognized, which was also amazing. But it was, the pictures were taken during the Hungarian transports, so that that limited the number of possibilities finding yourself. Yes.
My name is Barbara Diskin. I just wondered, during the entire time you were there, was there any kindness shown to you at all, or were these people just like monsters?
No, not from the Nazis. There was a definite separation of who is human and who is not. They were superhuman and we were subhuman. We definitely were subhuman. You could see it in their eyes. They made us feel the terror that they represented. And so it was best not to look in their eyes. I remember going like this, because I don't think I was dreaming about the fact that if you look them in the eyes was trouble, because my aunt Rose, she was defiant and very proud. When we were taken from one place to the other, we were accompanied by guards. And so I know she would look them in the eye. And what followed immediately was that she got lashes with a belt. And nobody else, it didn't happen to anyone else in that particular time. And I finally figured out that she lifted her head and looked them in the eye. And maybe they saw a human being and didn't like it. but we were definitely treated like subhumans. And it's a terrible feeling. You feel it all over. You know that something terrible is happening to yourself, that you're not a human being, and you're trapped with monsters. You know, now it's not, I can't describe the feeling that one human being can do that to you, to give you that feeling that you're not human and you're trapped in their clutches. Yes.
Hi, Roberta Gluck. Some time ago, 60 Minutes did a piece on holograms. I believe they were holograms that they've taken of Holocaust survivors, so that when they're no longer with us physically, we can still see images of them and hear their stories.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been involved in any project like that or know of any project like that?
No, but I was.
So the holograms come from the Shoah Foundation in California. So they started it. And when I saw that, I immediately said, let's do it. But I found out that first it was COVID, so they had stopped. And you would also have to go to California to do it. And then they said, well, it costs $75,000. So if you want to go to your community center or your synagogue and they want to raise the money, then we can do it, because it's a very expensive thing. So I think my mother's going to miss out on that. But what she was going to answer is that she was on 60 Minutes, but not for that particular segment. She was, yeah. So she really just said that she was interviewed in 60 Minutes having to do with the, oh yeah. She was interviewed on 60 Minutes with Anderson Cooper having to do with the play Here There Are Blueberries. And if any of you know that, and they wanted a survivor, so she was interviewed. But then Anderson Cooper was so taken with my mother that he asked her to be on his podcast on grief. And so if you look up Anderson Cooper grief, you'll see a list of podcasts, and my mother is listed as one of them. And it's an incredible segment. So sorry to explain that.
I didn't know about that hologram. Yes. So.
Hello.
Okay. Yes.
Did you go home? Did you try to go home after you were liberated, or did you go to a DP camp?
Well, we did not go home, and also we did not go to a DQ camp because my two aunts who were with us, unfortunately, one of them, Piri, was killed. The last stage where we were, she got typhus, and because if you got sick, you got killed, and if you're sick, no chance. So it was my other aunt Rose, and she also was very sick. And so we had a bit of luck for the first time. To get back home, to get out of Germany, there was no transportation whatsoever. And we were liberated by the Russians, and they did not, that particular Russian army, the camp had typhus. So when they looked in and saw the sick people, they left and they never came back. And so we were left without help and without transportation. So we had to hang around in Germany, move into one empty house into another. And so we didn't get home for a very long time. Finally, we got to Prague, Czechoslovakia, where we discovered that a brother, my mother's brother, a brother of these two aunts, who was the only one who left for Palestine in the middle 30s, a young man in his 20s. And we didn't know that he came back as a soldier from Palestine under the British Army and a Jewish brigade that formed there and came back. So he was a soldier, and he actually was stationed near Prague. Nobody knew any of this, but my Aunt Rose, who was, people in Prague became sort of a place where refugees came back. Nobody knew anybody who survived. So we connected with Yossi, Joseph, in Prague. And so he took us under his wings. We were finally liberated when we met him, because until then we were in and out of hospitals and didn't know what to do. So he took care of us after that. He took us to where he was stationed, and he fed us from the kitchen, the mess from the army, and we began to rebuild. My aunt, his sister Rosie, was put into a hospital for a long period. She was sick. Anyway, because he took care of us and then rented a place for us and continued to take care of us, we didn't have to go to a DP camp, and we had no way of going home. But eventually, a few more survivors, young adults, there were no children. Out of maybe 14 grandchildren, only my sister and I survived. And the parents of the children also did not survive. Anyone who had children, the parents didn't survive. But anyhow, the young adults who did survive, Yossi took care of us, rented a place for us, fed us. And as people got a little stronger, actually the family decided that one of my young uncles and I would be the two people who should go back to the homeland to see what's there. And that was maybe 6 months after. So he and I went, and it was a saga because there was still no transportation. And, you know, the trains were packed. It looked like when you sometimes see in pictures that people are on the roof of the train and hanging out of the windows. That's the kind of train trip my uncle and I took to get home from Prague, because we didn't live close to Prague or Budapest. We were in the countryside. So yes, so I went home, and a family was living in my house, but that wasn't unusual. I went into the house, and we didn't introduce ourselves, but everybody knew what was going on. They knew who I was. The woman with children, she went to one side, and I went through the house, room to room, came out the other end. There was nothing of ours there. And I went out into the garden, and I was finally understood, you know, where I was. And we had fruit trees that were full of fruit, and I just, up to that time, I never cried. This is a statement that maybe is hard to understand, but I never could cry the whole time. But seeing the fruit and no one to pick it and empty house, I finally broke down and left. And when I got out to the street, a lot of the neighbors gathered. Everybody, you know, there's no communication, but everybody knew that somebody was back. And, you know, they surrounded me and they told me they had troubles. Okay.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Wait. Everyone needs to hear.
Okay, basically at the time you came back, were the people not very welcoming, I take it? Because in a lot of places they didn't, even after the war in Poland and Hungary,
Yeah.
they didn't particularly want the Jews back.
I know, yes, it's true. It didn't happen to me. 2000 at the most. Most of my father was born there. His father was living there for many years. Third generation. Pardon me?
Could you say the name of the town?
The neighbor, it's a little town called Bótrágy. It was close to a bigger town called Munkács, Beregszáz. Those two cities had lots of Jews, many, many thousands, but we were off in a small area, and they wanted to talk to us, actually. They were not, they knew my father, who grew up there, and he did business with the farmers, you know, through his lumber yard. So we didn't have that problem, but I didn't want the house. I didn't want to stay. And, you know, later my sister, so we all decided we didn't want to live there again. We just came to see. I didn't want to take anything. I didn't see anything of my, it was just, it had to be done, you know, see what's going on. Then my uncle and I went to where his house, his family's house, my grandfather's house was. And in his house, it's a bigger town, he owned a flour mill, which was very lucrative at the time because this was all farming area. And so 2 of the sons who came back, they decided to open the mill and run it. And they were able to do it until that area was then taken over by Russia. And so we knew that Russia will take that over. So we didn't want to stay. But my 2 uncles, the young guys, who said, oh, we'll get out in time, we'll get out in time. And they didn't. And the Russians occupied it very soon after the war was over. And they got stuck for 25 years behind the Russian, in Russia, and had a terrible time, almost like a second concentration camp. So it's another history. But I got out with my young uncle. We went back to the area of Prague. And then my uncle, who was now a veteran, he resigned. I mean, he got out of the army and he was a veteran. So he had a lot of privileges in Czechoslovakia. We stayed in that area. He began to look for exit visas for all of us to leave the country. None of us wanted to ever stay in Europe again. So some of them chose to go to it, which was still not Israel, go to Palestine. Some of us tried to come here. So for getting papers and getting everything, identifications from scratch, and in this country didn't open up the door for us. We had to wait 2 years to enter the US, but wouldn't have done it even then if it hadn't been for my uncle, who had all the privileges as a soldier and as a veteran to take care of us. That's why we never had to go to a displaced camp.
Oh, I'm Philippine. I was wondering, living today, what lessons can we as American Jews get from your experiences? And do you have any? Do you feel any echoes of what happened then in today's world?
The echo is loud and clear in my ears. Very much like that. Very scary. Everybody knows, but yes, the echoes are here. And at my age, to see that is not fair.
We have time for one more question. And who would like to ask it? Okay.
This is not a question. I want to thank you for doing this. I have to believe that it called upon a lot of memories that you'd rather not deal with. And I am deeply appreciative of your willingness to stand here and tell us everything you've told us. Thank you.
Thank you.